Hello everyone, welcome to DeepSight World. Today we will talk about the history of Ottoman civilization, rise, development, and decline of the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire, a once powerful empire, had a profound impact on world history. Let's explore the history of the Ottoman Empire together. First, let's look at the origins of the Ottoman Turks. Their ancestors can be traced back to the Turks, a nomadic people who lived on the Mongolian plateau in the 4th to 5th centuries AD. The origins and early history of the Turks remain largely a mystery. Due to limited historical records from ancient times, we know very little about the lives and activities of the Turks before they were recorded in history. A widely accepted view is that the Turks may have originated from the Xiongnu, a nomadic people who lived in the Mongolian plateau from the 3rd century BC to the 1st century AD. However, there is a lack of strictly historical records on the activities of the Huns after they were defeated by the Han dynasty in China and moved westward. According to some anthropological archaeological research, the Turks should have originated from the northern Mongol race area and belong to the Yellow race. However, their distribution range is extremely wide. In some areas, there are a large number of European race characteristics, and they are a mixture of European race and Mongol race. The main ethnic group of the Ottoman Turks is Turks. They belong to the Europa race, speak Turkish, and believe in Islam. Their ancestors can be traced back to the Turks at the earliest, but due to long-term interbreeding with the peoples of West Asia and Eastern Europe, their bloodline is biased towards the Caucasus race, and very little of the original Turkic bloodline is preserved. The Ottoman Empire was founded by the Turks, but the genetic comparison of the modern Ottoman royal family is highly overlapping with that of the Armenians, but there is a large gap between it and Turkmenistan and Azerbaijanis. In the modern Republic of Turkey, due to hundreds of years of military conquest and immigration, as well as the absorption of millions of Islamized Slavic refugees, millions of Greek refugees, Crimean Tatars, and Caucasian Muslims in modern times, modern Turkey, the Turks are of even lower Turkic origin than the Armenians. Therefore, the racial attributes of the Ottoman Turks are complex and include the characteristics of multiple races. Turks and Turks both speak Turkic languages, but their cultures and customs are very different. The culture of the Turks is mainly influenced by Central Asia, while the culture of the Turks is influenced by Western Asia and Europe. The official language of the Ottoman Empire was Ottoman Turkish. The language belongs to the Turkic language family and was widely spoken among the nobility and upper classes of the Ottoman Empire. There are numerous Arabic and Persian loanwords in Ottoman Turkish. During the Ottoman Empire, the Ottoman language commonly used in the Middle East was a language system with Turkish as the basic language structure, Arabic and Persian vocabulary as the main body, and Arabic spelling. The vocabulary and writing grammar of this language were incompatible with Kemal's national invention, and thus the Turkish language reform began. In 1928, Kemal directed the establishment of the Turkish Language Association. The association's political mission was to remove Arabic and Persian words, thereby severing the inheritance relationship between Turkish and the Ottoman Empire and severing the affinity with surrounding Arabic and Persian languages. Link. During the Ottoman Empire, they used the Arabic alphabet to spell their language. This language was called Ottoman Turkish, and it contained many loanwords from Arabic and Persian. By 1928, as part of Turkey's modernization process, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk issued a decree replacing the Arabic alphabet with the Latin alphabet. This alphabet has been used ever since and became a new starting point for the development of modern Turkish. Modern Turkish is written using the Turkish alphabet, which is modified from the Latin alphabet. Today, only scholars and those who learned before 1928 can read Ottoman Turkish texts written in Turkish. Most Turks today consider themselves to be descendants of Turks. However, from a genetic perspective, the Turkic ancestry of modern Turks is very thin, with less than 10% remaining. In the 13th century, due to the westward expansion of the Mongols, the Turks were forced to migrate to Asia Minor. In Asia Minor, they gradually rose up and established the Ottoman Empire. The establishment of the Ottoman Empire marked the beginning of a new historical period. In 1299, Osman I called himself Bey and officially established the Ottoman Empire. Their country grew from a small tribal nation into a powerful empire. The development of the Ottoman Empire can be divided into several stages. The first is the rise stage. From 1299 to 1453, the Ottoman Empire gradually expanded its territory and finally captured Constantinople in 1453, marking the rise of the Ottoman Empire. The history of the Ottoman Empire begins with the decline of the Eastern Roman Empire. The Ottomans were a small Turkic tribe under the original Seljuk Sultanate of Roma. This tribe gradually settled in the Anatolian Peninsula of Turkey. In the early days, there were many integrations and wars with the Byzantine Greek people. After the fall of the Sultanate of Roma in 1308, Anatolia, located between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, split into several independent states, collectively known as the Anatolian princes. In 1300, the weakened Eastern Roman Empire lost control of its region in Anatolia, which was ruled by a princedom led by Osman I, which held Eskişehir in western Anatolia. Osman first expanded his territory to the border of the Eastern Roman Empire and moved the capital to Bursa, earning him the nickname Kara. Kara means dark and brave. Osman I was widely regarded as a powerful leader, and even after his death, a centuries-old Turkish proverb still circulates: "He may be stronger than Osman." His reputation was also enhanced by the medieval Turkish story Othman's Dream, a myth about Osman's vision of the Ottoman Empire in his youth and his decision to conquer various countries. During his reign, a formal Ottoman government was established, which subsequently underwent dramatic transformations during the imperial period. In addition, the government established legal entities, called millets, under which various religious sects and ethnic minorities could enjoy a certain degree of autonomy. After the death of Osman I, the rule of the Ottoman Empire expanded to the eastern Mediterranean and the Balkans. In 1387, Thessaloniki, an important city under Venetian rule, was captured by the Ottoman Empire. In 1389, the Ottoman Empire's victory in the Battle of Kosovo led to the end of Serbian rule in the Balkans and removed the barrier to the Ottoman Empire's march into Europe. The Battle of Nicopolis in 1396 is regarded as the last large-scale crusade in the Middle Ages, but it failed to prevent the Ottoman Empire from continuing to expand. The Turkish control of the Balkans continued to expand, so attacking Constantinople was a key goal of the Ottoman Empire. Almost all of the area surrounding Constantinople fell into Ottoman hands. In 1402, Timur invaded Anatolia, and Sultan Bayezid I was defeated and captured in the Battle of Angola, allowing the Eastern Roman Empire to survive. After 1402, the Ottoman Empire temporarily lost control of the parts of the Balkans it occupied and regained control of the region during the reign of Murad II between the 1430s and 1450s. The capture of Bayezid I caused great chaos among the Turks. The sons of Bayezid first fought for the throne and fought a war from 1402 to 1413. Muhammad first succeeded to the throne as Sultan, ending the war for the throne and marking the end of the Great Interregnum. Muhammad II, the grandson of Muhammad I, reorganized the state and military structure and captured Constantinople on May 29, 1453. Muhammad II was only 21 years old at the time. The Battle of Constantinople was a typical siege battle in which the Ottoman Turkish Empire destroyed the Byzantine Empire. It lasted from April 6 to May 29, 1453. The Ottoman Empire invested a total of about 80,000 to 200,000 troops and used 126 ships. The Ottoman army suffered about 40,000 casualties, and the Byzantine army suffered about 7,000 casualties. In this battle, the Ottoman army used artillery, battering rams, slings, etc. to attack the city walls, and finally succeeded in capturing Constantinople. Although the Byzantine soldiers and civilians in the city resisted tenaciously, the castle was eventually captured due to being outnumbered. Constantine XI, the last emperor of the Byzantine Empire, died under the city walls after Constantinople was captured by the Ottoman Empire on May 29. This battle marked the end of the Byzantine Empire and the end of the European medieval era. The battle disrupted the mainland trade routes connecting Europe and Asia, and also prompted Europeans to turn to sea voyages to discover the New World. Constantinople became the new capital of the Ottoman Empire and was renamed Istanbul. After the fall of Constantinople, the city suffered severe damage and fell into ruins. However, the Ottomans did not catch all people of different faiths. but retained a certain degree of religious freedom and cultural traditions. For example, Christian believers still enjoyed freedom of belief under the Ottoman Empire. Although Christian churches are no longer part of the state, they can retain their own rituals and living traditions. Sultan Muhammad II appointed a new patriarch to the Greek church, Gennadius, who was given certain privileges to maintain the religious affairs of the faithful. The iconic Hagia Sophia was converted into the Hagia Sophia Mosque, and Muhammad deliberately protected the church so that it could still be used as an Orthodox cathedral. At the same time, he began to use the title of Roman Emperor, but neither Greece nor Western Europe recognized Muhammad II as bearing this title, and the Russian Tsar also claimed to be the successor of the Eastern Roman Empire. In order to consolidate his name, Muhammad II hoped to capture Rome. In 1480, the Ottoman Empire occupied Otranto and Puglia and penetrated into the Italian peninsula. However, the death of Muhammad II on May 3, 1481 suspended the Ottoman Empire's expedition. What followed was its heyday, from 1453 to 1566, when the Ottoman Empire further expanded its territory and extended its influence across Europe, Asia, and Africa. During the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent, the Ottoman Empire reached its peak. Under his rule, the empire's territory further expanded to include Anatolia, southwestern Europe, mainland Greece, the Balkans, parts of northern Iraq, Azerbaijan, Syria, Palestine, parts of the Arabian Peninsula, Egypt, and parts of North Africa, and the major Mediterranean islands of Rhodes, Cyprus, and Crete. At its peak, the Ottoman Empire covered an area of more than 5 million square kilometers and had a population of 20 million. During this period, the Ottoman Navy, under the leadership of Barbarossa, became the strongest army in the Mediterranean. Their military success allowed Islamic and Turkish culture to spread to Europe, Asia, and Africa. In addition, the Ottoman Empire also carried out a series of modernization reforms during this period, which made the boundaries between Eastern and Western civilizations increasingly blurred. The works of their architect Sinan are still famous in history. Decline phase, starting from 1699, this phase of the Ottoman Empire was mainly characterized by military defeats and political corruption. This phase lasted until 1792, and then entered a phase of decline and disintegration of the empire until 1918. At this stage, the Ottoman Empire faced many challenges. First of all, there were problems with the empire's political system and governance methods. At the same time, the rapid development of the Western European world and the restrictions on the empire's economic and cultural progress were also important factors leading to its decline. Although the Ottoman Empire carried out a series of reforms in an attempt to revitalize the empire, nationalist movements within the empire were on the rise, especially in the Balkans, where separatist activities often occurred. The empire continued to suffer defeats on all fronts and continued to lose territory during the 19th and early 20th centuries. In addition, the empire's conservative attitude towards cultural and technological progress was also an important reason for its decline. For example, the printing press invented by Gutenberg was called the devil's invention by the Ottomans. Printing technology was not widely used in the Ottoman Empire, which hindered the spread of new culture and technology within the empire. In World War I, the Ottoman Empire was defeated and the empire eventually disintegrated after the war. In 1922, the last Sultan Muhammad VI fled Constantinople on a British warship and went into exile overseas. The Ottoman Empire officially came to an end. This marked the end of the declining phase of the Ottoman Empire. The economic, political, and religious conditions of the Ottoman Empire were also an important part of its history. The economic system of the Ottoman Empire was mainly based on agriculture, but also developed handicrafts and commerce. Regarding the land system, the Ottoman Empire implemented a system called tax farming. Under this system, land was nationalized and then distributed to tax collectors. Farmers were tied to the land and paid certain taxes to the state on a regular basis. This system ensured the stability of agricultural production and promoted the development of foreign trade. However, as time went by, the drawbacks of the tax farming system began to emerge. A wide variety of exorbitant taxes and miscellaneous taxes reduced farmers' enthusiasm for production, and handicrafts and commerce were also severely damaged. In terms of political system, the Ottoman Empire implemented a feudal autocratic monarchy that combined politics and religion. The Sultan was the supreme ruler of the Ottoman Empire. He was regarded as the representative of Allah and combined political, military, judicial, and religious powers. Under the Sultan, the empire's state system was divided into three major systems: military administration, religious justice, and financial taxation, which were respectively responsible for the prime minister, imam, and financial director. Religiously, the Ottoman Empire was an Islamic country, but they also gave certain tolerance to believers of other religions. As we introduced earlier, the founder of the Ottoman Empire, Osman I, and his tribe members were attached to the Roman Sultanate established by the Seljuk Turkmen who believed in Islam at the beginning of the establishment of the empire. They were adjacent to the Byzantine Empire. They received a fief on the banks of the Sakarya River, so they were already believers in Islam very early. However, the Ottoman Empire was not just an Islamic country, its religious policies also showed strong tolerance. The Ottoman Empire allowed Christians and Jews to maintain their original beliefs. Under the millet system of the Ottoman Empire, non-Muslims were subjects of the empire just like Muslims, but were not subject to or controlled by Islamic beliefs and laws. Finally, let's look at the impact of the Ottoman Empire on world civilization. The establishment and development of the Ottoman Empire had a profound impact on world history. Their military conquests allowed Islamic and Turkish culture to spread to Europe, Asia, and Africa. At the same time, their art and architecture also had an important impact on world art and architecture. This is the history of the Ottoman Empire that we will introduce today. I hope we can get some inspiration from it and have a deeper understanding of the Ottoman Empire. Thank you everyone for watching. See you next time.